you need to pause for a moment. Not because you are weak, but because you have been listening to the wrong narrator inside your own head. There is a voice that has been whispering to you, especially late at night, or in the quiet seconds after a long day. It tells you that you are behind, that you should be further along, that if you were truly chosen, truly called, truly aligned, you would not feel this tired. It points at your exhaustion as evidence. It points at your unfinished goals, your strained relationships, your fragile bank account, your lingering doubts, and it builds a case against you. The verdict sounds convincing. You failed. You missed it. You are not who you thought you were, . But that voice is not the final authority over your story, . Right now, heaven is not reviewing your life the way you are. While you are replaying your worst moments, God is rewinding a completely different scene. He is not zooming in on the fact that you felt overwhelmed. He is not highlighting the tear that rolled down your face or the frustration that clenched your jaw. He is pointing at a specific moment this week, perhaps one you barely noticed. And he is saying, look at that. It was the moment you wanted to quit, but stayed. The moment you wanted to retaliate, but restrained yourself. The moment you were empty, but still chose integrity. You thought you were unraveling. Heaven saw you holding the line. You interpreted your shaking hands as collapse. Heaven interpreted them as courage. This is the revelation that shifts everything you did not break down. You exceeded expectations, not because you felt strong, but because you chose correctly when you felt weak. You assumed victory would feel triumphant, loud, and obvious. Instead, it felt like survival. It felt like swallowing words you wanted to say. It felt like walking away from shortcuts that would have given you temporary relief. It felt like praying with dry eyes and an exhausted body. You thought the test was about visible power. It was actually about invisible integrity. When God says, "This is what I have been waiting for," He is not referring to your performance. He is referring to your decision under pressure. He is not applauding your charisma or your public strength. He is honoring your private restraint. The moment you thought exposed your weakness actually revealed your maturity. The moment you thought disqualified you became your qualification. And while you were questioning yourself, heaven was recording your response as evidence that you are ready for more. But readiness requires structure. Authority requires alignment. And that is why this is not just encouragement. This is preparation. You are about to receive 3 protocols of the Crown Principles that will stabilize you in the next season, so that success does not overwhelm you and opportunity does not destabilize you. These are not abstract ideas. They are rules of engagement for the level you are stepping into. They will guard your peace, refine your language, and protect your frequency in a world that constantly tries to pull you back into chaos. And there is more. Because part of your exhaustion has not been spiritual failure. It has been biological overload. You have been fighting battles in your spirit while your nervous system has been stuck in survival mode. You have been declaring faith while your body has been bracing for impact. There is a hidden key built into your very design, a biological alignment that allows your mind to synchronize with your calling. When that key turns, clarity replaces panic, authority replaces strain, peace replaces constant alertness. This is not coincidence. If you are hearing this, it is confirmation. You are standing at a threshold even if your surroundings look unchanged. The internal war that made you question yourself has already produced the evidence heaven was looking for. Now comes activation. Not loud, not dramatic, but deliberate. You are being invited to step out of self-accusation and into divine validation. To stop interpreting your fatigue as failure. To stop measuring your worth by external proof. To receive the truth that your integrity under pressure was the very thing that qualified you. This is your moment of prophetic confirmation. The season of proving is closing. The season of structured authority is opening. And what felt like your lowest point is about to be revealed as the turning point you did not see coming. The test you didn't realize you passed begins in the quiet accusation that follows you even after moments of faith, because if you are honest, there have been days when the prophetic words spoken over your life felt almost embarrassing to repeat. You have heard promises about elevation, influence, breakthrough, restoration. Yet when you look at your present circumstances, they do not resemble royalty. They resemble construction dust. You scroll past testimonies of other chosen ones who appear confident, radiant, already stepping into abundance, and something tightens in your chest. A whisper asks whether you misheard God. A thought suggests that maybe you projected meaning onto ordinary events. You start to wonder if you are performing belief rather than possessing it. This is the subtle torment of feeling like a fraud despite carrying a calling. It is not that you stopped believing entirely. It is that your environment does not mirror the magnitude of what you were told. You expected visible confirmation by now. Instead, you are navigating unfinished chapters, delayed answers, and battles that seem disproportionate to the promises. But what if the dissonance between prophecy and reality is not proof of deception, but proof of development? What if the tension you feel is not exposure, but expansion? Because the evaluation system of heaven does not operate by external symmetry. It does not measure your readiness by the size of your platform or the stability of your bank account. It measures something far more precise and far less visible. This is where the conflict between external chaos and internal evaluation must be understood, because you have been grading yourself based on outcomes while God has been examining you based on decisions. You have been looking at what is happening around you, the unresolved issues, the resistance, the unpredictability, and concluding that the presence of struggle indicates the absence of favor. But heaven has been focused on what is happening inside you while the chaos swirls. When pressure increased, did you compromise or did you remain anchored? When betrayal stung, did you mirror it or did you restrain it? When fatigue tempted you to cut corners, did you rationalize or did you resist? These are the metrics that determine authority. And this takes us into the depth of 1 Samuel 16:7, a verse often quoted but rarely unpacked with the weight it deserves. The scripture says that man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Yet the Hebrew word used for heart is lev, and lev is not merely the seat of emotion. It is the command center of the human being. It is where will, intellect, intention, and moral choice converge. It is the internal control room from which actions are dispatched. When God examines the lev, He is not asking whether you felt confident. He is asking what you chose when confidence was absent. He is not scanning your emotional state. He is scanning your executive function. He is observing the micro decisions that define character under strain. And this is where you passed a test you did not even recognize as a test, because the moment felt too ordinary, too personal, too hidden to be significant. It may have happened in your car, gripping the steering wheel, replaying a conversation where you were disrespected. It may have happened when an opportunity surfaced that would have provided fast relief but required subtle dishonesty. It may have happened in a private argument where you could have escalated the conflict and justified it. In those moments, your emotions were loud. Your flesh demanded expression. Anger wanted release. Fear wanted control. Exhaustion wanted escape. Yet something in your lev made a decision that contradicted your impulse. You deleted the message. You declined the shortcut. You lowered your voice instead of raising it. You walked away while your pride screamed to stay and win. That decision felt like weakness because it did not produce immediate gratification. It felt like loss because it did not change your circumstances overnight. But in the invisible courtroom of heaven, that was the evidence entered into record. Integrity in secret moments is the true qualification for public authority. Most people believe that promotion is earned through visibility, but spiritual authority is forged in concealment. When no applause accompanies your restraint, when no one knows how hard it was to remain honorable, when your obedience costs you something tangible, that is when the lev is strengthened. The test was never about whether you could perform righteousness when watched. It was about whether you could preserve integrity when unseen. You thought the trial was about endurance, It was actually about alignment. Because authority without integrity is dangerous, and heaven does not entrust crowns to those who fracture under private pressure. You have underestimated the power of choosing honor over emotional relief. Emotional relief is seductive because it promises immediate comfort. Send the harsh reply and feel vindicated. Take the questionable deal and feel secure. Vent publicly and feel supported. Each option offers short-term satisfaction, but long-term erosion. You resisted that erosion. You absorbed discomfort instead of exporting it. That absorption felt heavy. It felt unfair. It felt like swallowing glass. But that restraint refined your lev. It expanded your capacity. It proved that your identity is not dictated by your feelings. And this is the hidden victory that reframes everything you kept your heart when you lost your strength. Strength is often romanticized as visible stamina, but heart is demonstrated in decision. There were moments you were tired beyond explanation. Your body signaled depletion. Your mind questioned endurance. Yet your control center remained loyal to who you are called to be. You did not curse what you once prayed for. You did not abandon your values because circumstances did not reward you quickly enough. You felt weak, but you did not become corrupted. That distinction is everything. Because weakness does not disqualify you. Corruption does. Exhaustion does not remove your calling. Bitterness does. And you guarded against bitterness. You may not have felt triumphant, but you remained aligned. Heaven saw that alignment and marked it. You thought you were barely surviving. God saw you stabilizing under weight that would have broken others. This is why the feeling of being a fraud must be dismantled. Fraudulence implies pretending to be something you are not. But you have been consistent with your core even when inconsistent in your energy. You have been faithful in choice even when fatigued in emotion. That is not fraud. That is formation. The gap between promise and manifestation is where identity is sealed. You are not being evaluated by applause. You are being evaluated by alignment. And in that evaluation, you passed. Not because you were flawless, not because you never felt doubt, but because when your lev was pressured, it chose integrity. The test you did not realize you were taking has already been graded. And the result is this. You are more prepared than you think, more stable than you feel, and more trusted than you know. Chazak. The grip that qualified. You moves us deeper into the anatomy of what actually happened when you chose integrity, because what you experienced was not passive endurance but active gripping. In Job 2:3, God speaks of Job and says, "And still he holds fast his integrity." That phrase "holds fast" comes from the Hebrew word chazak, and chazak is not a gentle word. It is not the image of someone loosely carrying a cup or casually maintaining balance. Chazak means to seize, to fasten upon, to strengthen, to grip with force. It carries the imagery of a man hanging from a cliff edge, fingers dug into a rope, muscles trembling, refusing to let go even when gravity pulls with relentless pressure. When God described Job, he was not praising his comfort. He was highlighting his grip. Job had lost wealth, children, health, reputation, and still the text says he chazak, he clung violently to his integrity. That is the same dynamic that unfolded in your life, though your losses may have looked different. Perhaps you did not lose livestock or land, but you lost illusions. You lost certain relationships. You lost the version of the future you thought would arrive sooner. And in the middle of that loss, you gripped your values with force. It did not feel heroic. It felt exhausting. But heaven recognized it as chazak. Integrity under pressure is not merely moral behavior, it is spiritual authority training. Authority is not granted to those who can shine under ease. It is entrusted to those who remain aligned under strain. Pressure reveals whether your convictions are decorative or foundational. When life tightens around you, squeezing expectations, resources, and timelines, what spills out determines your readiness. Many speak boldly in seasons of abundance. Many declare faith when outcomes are favorable. But chazak is forged when circumstances contradict your confession. You chose not to become what hurt you. You chose not to mirror betrayal with betrayal. You chose not to weaponize your disappointment. That choice strengthened something invisible in you. You were not just surviving. You were being conditioned for weight. Because authority carries weight. Influence carries scrutiny. Promotion carries responsibility. If your character fractures under present pressure, it would collapse under future visibility. So the very discomfort you resented was calibrating you. Most people release the rope when pain begins. They rationalize letting go by calling it self-preservation. They tell themselves that integrity is optional when survival feels threatened. They trade long-term authority for short-term relief. Pain exposes the depth of a person's alignment. When the rope burns their hands, they loosen their grip and fall into reaction. You felt that burn. You felt the sting of unfairness, the fatigue of waiting the temptation to defend yourself loudly, to justify compromise because of exhaustion. Yet you did not release. You trembled, yes. You questioned, yes. But you held. That holding was not weakness. It was violence against your lower impulses. It was force applied against your own despair. That is chazak. It is strength expressed through restraint. And heaven does not overlook restraint. When God pointed to Job and declared pride in his grip, it was because integrity sustained under loss is rare. You demonstrated rarity. Yet this is where confusion often arises. You won the spiritual battle. You gripped the rope. You maintained alignment. So why do you still feel depleted? Why does your body not reflect the victory your spirit secured? This is where we must distinguish between realms. The spiritual battle was about decision. The biological battle is about regulation. Spiritually, you chose faithfulness. Biologically, your nervous system absorbed the stress of the season. While your spirit declared trust, your body remained on alert. The rope you held required tension in your muscles metaphorically and literally. Long seasons of pressure condition your brain into survival mode. Your cortisol rises. Your breathing shortens. Your shoulders tighten. Even after the decision is made, the body remembers the threat. This is why victory can feel hollow if you do not understand what is happening beneath the surface. You assume that because you chose correctly, you should immediately feel peace. But peace in the spirit does not automatically translate into calm in the nervous system. This is the tension Jesus identified in Matthew 26:41 when he said, "The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." The disciples were not rebellious in that moment. They were exhausted. Their spirit loved Jesus. Their intention was pure. Yet their bodies could not sustain the vigilance required. We often read that verse as a rebuke, but it is also a diagnosis. There is a difference between moral failure and biological limitation. You have been interpreting your exhaustion as spiritual inadequacy. In reality, your spirit has been willing and faithful. Your flesh has simply been taxed. The conflict between willing spirit and exhausted flesh is not hypocrisy, it is humanity. You can deeply trust God and still feel physically drained. You can choose integrity and still experience anxiety in your chest. You can hold the rope spiritually while your nervous system shakes. Understanding this distinction prevents self-condemnation. It also prepares you for the next layer of growth, because the enemy cannot easily steal your salvation, but he can attempt to sabotage your sustainability. If he can keep your body in perpetual stress, you will begin to question your spiritual progress. If he can exhaust you enough, you may misinterpret fatigue as failure. That is why recognizing the biological aftermath of chazak is crucial. Your grip qualified you, but your body now requires recalibration. Authority demands endurance. Endurance requires alignment between spirit and flesh. When Jesus acknowledged the disciples' weakness, he did not revoke their calling. He understood that development includes strengthening what is weak. The same applies to you. The fact that you feel tired does not negate your victory. It confirms the intensity of the season you endured. But you are not meant to live permanently in that heightened state. The rope was held, the test was passed. Now comes restoration and synchronization. The grip that qualified you must be followed by the renewal that sustains you. Because you are not being prepared merely to survive trials. You are being prepared to steward influence. And influence cannot be carried by someone perpetually operating in survival mode. So do not mistake your current fatigue for regression. It is the echo of effort, not the absence of growth. Your spirit proved its loyalty. Your lev remained aligned. You chazak when it mattered most. And now the same God who observed your grip intends to strengthen your frame. The willing spirit that kept you anchored will not abandon you in the process of rebuilding your strength. The rope did not break. You did not fall. That alone distinguishes you. And as we move forward, understand this: the grip that qualified you is evidence that you are already stronger than you think, even if your body has yet to catch up with what your spirit has achieved. The biological war high beta verses. Theta brings us into a dimension of the battle you were never taught to name, because while you were rebuking devils and declaring scriptures, something quieter and more technical was happening inside your skull. You have a chosen spirit, yes, but that spirit has been operating inside a nervous system trained by stress. When pressure stretches across weeks and months, your brain adapts for survival. Neuroscience calls this high beta a brainwave pattern associated with vigilance analysis, threat detection, and anxiety. High beta is useful in short bursts. It helps you respond to danger, meet deadlines, escape immediate threats. But when it becomes chronic, it turns your internal world into a battlefield. Your thoughts race, your jaw tightens, your breathing becomes shallow. Your muscles stay braced as if something is about to collapse at any moment. You wake up already tired. You fall asleep with unfinished loops still spinning. High beta is like revving a car engine in first gear for hours. The system overheats. The fuel burns quickly. The noise increases. And eventually, even small challenges feel overwhelming because the baseline of your body is already tense. This is the survival brain at work. It does not ask whether the threat is real or imagined. It only asks whether it must stay alert. Long seasons of uncertainty, betrayal, financial strain, relational tension, and spiritual warfare condition that alertness. Your body learned that rest was unsafe because something might happen. So even after you made the right decision spiritually, your nervous system remained on guard. This is why prayer can feel powerful in the moment, yet anxiety lingers afterward. You enter worship and sense God's presence. You declare truth and feel conviction. But when the music fades, the tension returns. You wonder why faith does not eliminate fear instantly. The answer is not a lack of belief. It is a lack of synchronization. Your spirit is transmitting trust, but your brain has been conditioned to transmit caution. You are broadcasting two frequencies at once. One says God is in control. The other says, stay alert, danger is near. This dual transmission creates exhaustion because your internal systems are not unified. Spirit transmitting faith while brain transmitting fear is not hypocrisy. It is misalignment. You love God sincerely. You mean every prayer. Yet your amygdala, the threat detection center of your brain, fires as if something is about to go wrong. Your prefrontal cortex attempts logic and theology. Your limbic system responds with tension, and you interpret that tension as spiritual failure. But the enemy is strategic. He cannot revoke your salvation. He cannot erase your calling, but he can attempt to hijack your biology. If he can keep you locked in high beta, you will doubt your clarity. You will misread neutral events as threats. You will overreact to minor obstacles. You will burn out before the crown even settles. It is easier to exhaust a chosen one than to corrupt one. So the attack shifts from doctrine to dopamine, from theology to neurotransmitters. Keep them stressed. Keep them scrolling. Keep them overstimulated. Keep them reacting. Because a chronically stressed brain struggles to hear subtle instruction. High beta drowns out whisper-level guidance. It amplifies noise. This is why you sometimes feel like God is silent, when in reality your frequency is crowded. The issue is not absence of divine communication. It is interference. The need then is not merely to pray harder, but to synchronize biology with theology. Theology informs what you believe. Biology influences how you experience that belief. If your body remains in fight or flight, your experience of God will feel strained even if your doctrine is sound. Synchronization means teaching your nervous system that it is safe to rest while your spirit remains alert. It means retraining your brain to shift from survival to trust as a default state. This is not mystical. It is measurable. Brainwave patterns shift depending on focus, breathing, emotional regulation, and environment. When you move from high beta into slower frequencies, such as alpha and theta, something remarkable happens. Your body relaxes, creativity increases, intuition sharpens. You become less reactive and more responsive. Theta in particular has been associated with deep meditation, prayerful absorption, and what psychologists call flow states. In theta, the mind becomes receptive rather than defensive. It integrates rather than scans for danger. This is why mystics, monks, and contemplatives across centuries emphasized stillness. They were not escaping responsibility. They were accessing a state where spiritual perception and biological calm intersect. Theta can be described as the frequency of the chosen, not because it is magical, but because it reflects alignment. In theta, your internal systems cooperate. Your breath deepens. Your heart rate stabilizes. Your prefrontal cortex, responsible for wisdom and discernment, functions without the constant interruption of fear signals. You are no longer driving in first gear with the engine screaming. You shift into a smoother rhythm. Revelation becomes clearer because static decreases. Decisions become cleaner because panic recedes. You stop interpreting every delay as disaster. This does not mean challenges disappear. It means your internal response changes, and response shapes outcome more than circumstances alone. The enemy understands this, which is why distraction and overstimulation are primary tactics in this generation. Constant notifications, endless information, perpetual comparison, and unresolved stress keep the dial locked on high beta. A chosen one operating in high beta may have passion but lack sustainability. They may start strong but crash quickly. They may declare authority but feel internally fragmented. The crown requires coherence. Coherence requires regulation. Regulation requires intentional recalibration. This is not about becoming passive. It is about becoming powerful without burning out. Synchronizing biology with theology means your body agrees with your belief that God is sovereign. It means your nervous system does not contradict your confession. It means you can declare peace and feel it settling rather than fighting your physiology. When spirit and brain harmonize, clarity multiplies. You hear instructions without distortion. You sense when to move and when to wait. You become less impressed by noise and more attuned to nuance. This is why shifting from high beta to theta is not a luxury. It is preparation. You are not called to operate in perpetual emergency mode. You are called to govern. Governance requires calm. Authority requires steadiness. The frequency of the chosen is not frantic. It is firm. It is not loud. It is anchored. You have already proven your integrity through Chazak. Now you must cultivate sustainability through alignment. Your spirit has been willing. Your lev has been loyal. Your body must now learn that it is safe to release the constant brace. Because when your biology supports your theology, you stop fighting yourself. And when you stop fighting yourself, you become far more formidable against anything outside of you. Shortcut to Alignment invites you to consider that what ancient mystics pursued for decades in caves and monasteries may now be understood with clarity rather than mysticism. Because throughout history, those who sought divine intimacy recognized that the mind had to become still before revelation could become clear. Long before neuroscience gave names to brainwave states, contemplatives across traditions discovered that when the internal noise quieted, insight sharpened. They withdrew from distraction, not because they despised the world, but because they understood frequency. They sat in silence, breathed deliberately, chanted sacred sounds, repeated prayers rhythmically, all in pursuit of what we now identify as slower brainwave states, particularly theta. In that state, they reported heightened intuition, profound creativity, deeper spiritual communion, and a sense of effortless clarity. They did not possess EEG machines, but they possessed discipline. They did not speak of neural oscillations, but they spoke of divine stillness. What they were accessing was not superstition, it was alignment. Yet the modern world has engineered an environment that pulls you relentlessly in the opposite direction. Instead of caves, you have constant notifications. Instead of long silences, you have perpetual stimulation. Instead of rhythmic breathing, you have rapid consumption. The very design of contemporary life traps the brain in survival mode. News cycles amplify urgency. Social media rewards comparison. Economic instability triggers vigilance. The result is that your nervous system rarely descends into the slower restorative frequencies that once were cultivated intentionally. High beta becomes the default. Even when you attempt to rest, your mind scans for threat. Even when you attempt to pray, background noise competes for attention. You may love God sincerely, yet your neurological baseline remains hyper-alert. This is not a spiritual flaw. It is a structural challenge of your environment. And this is where brainwave entrainment emerges not as magic, but as a recalibration tool. Brainwave entrainment refers to the process by which external rhythmic stimuli, particularly sound, gently guide the brain toward specific frequencies. The brain naturally synchronizes to repeated patterns. When exposed to consistent rhythmic pulses, it begins to mirror that rhythm. This is why certain music can energize you while other music calms you. It is why rhythmic chanting across cultures has been associated with transcendence. The principle is simple: the brain follows pattern. When sound is engineered at specific intervals designed to encourage slower oscillations, the brain gradually shifts out of high beta and toward alpha or theta. This is not about forcing relaxation. It is about guiding the system back to its original capacity for calm. Think of it as tuning an instrument that has drifted out of pitch. The strings are not broken. They are simply stretched too tight. A tuning fork does not shame the instrument. It provides a reference frequency. In the same way, sound can act as a tuning fork for the soul, offering your brain a reference point for stability. When you listen to carefully structured frequencies for even a few minutes, your breathing deepens without effort. Your heart rate lowers naturally. The prefrontal cortex regains executive clarity. You do not have to wrestle your thoughts into submission. They settle because the environment inside your skull has shifted. This is crucial because many chosen ones exhaust themselves trying to force spiritual breakthroughs. They strive harder, they pray louder, they fast longer. Yet underneath the effort, their nervous system remains braced. Forceful striving keeps the brain in high beta. It reinforces the sense that something must be conquered immediately. Effort has its place, but alignment produces sustainability. When you move from forceful striving to effortless alignment, you discover that clarity does not require strain. It requires coherence. In a theta state, revelation feels accessible. Creativity flows without friction. Solutions surface organically because the mind is no longer consumed with defense. You begin to experience what psychologists describe as flow, a state in which action and awareness merge seamlessly. For a chosen one, this is not merely productivity, it is partnership. You sense divine guidance without static. You respond rather than react. The decisions that once felt overwhelming become measured. The voice of fear softens because the physiological conditions that amplified it have shifted. This is why stabilizing the crown requires neurological peace. Authority without calm leads to collapse. Influence without regulation leads to burnout. If God is elevating you into greater responsibility, your internal environment must be capable of sustaining that weight. The crown is symbolic of authority, but authority rests on the head. If the mind beneath it is unstable, the weight will feel crushing. But when your brain regularly enters theta, your resilience increases. Stressful events no longer hijack your entire system. You recover faster. You discern more clearly. You protect your energy without paranoia. You maintain integrity without resentment. The genius of this approach is that it does not require 20 years of seclusion. It does not demand monastic vows. It demands consistency. Even 7 intentional minutes a day can recalibrate your baseline. 7 minutes of guided entrainment can remind your nervous system what safety feels like. 7 minutes can shift your internal narrative from urgency to authority. Over time, that repetition becomes conditioning. High beta stops being your default. Theta becomes accessible. And when theta becomes familiar, you stop fighting yourself. Your theology that declares peace aligns with a biology that experiences peace. Your spirit that trusts God is no longer contradicted by a body braced for catastrophe. This alignment does not eliminate challenge. It equips you to face challenge without fragmentation. You become less impressed by chaos because your internal rhythm is steady. You do not chase validation because your mind is not frantic. You steward opportunities with calm discernment because your decisions are not filtered through panic. The mystics pursued this state through discipline. You can access it through design, not because you are superior, but because you are positioned in a generation where tools exist that previous generations lacked. This is not replacing prayer. It is supporting it. It is preparing the soil of your mind so that when you pray, the seed of revelation lands on regulated ground. It is stabilizing the crown through neurological peace so that when authority increases, anxiety does not. And as you integrate this into your life, you will notice something subtle but profound. You will begin to move differently, less reactive, more grounded, less hurried, more deliberate. You will recognize that the shortcut is not about bypassing growth. It is about accelerating alignment. Because the goal was never to make you work harder for God. It was to help your internal systems cooperate with the calling already placed upon you. Humility as qualification begins at the exact moment you realize that everything you prayed for is actually within reach, because there is a peculiar emotion that rises not when you are far from destiny, but when you are standing at its doorway. You expected confidence to flood you when confirmation arrived. You assumed that clarity would erase hesitation. Yet instead, as opportunity draws closer, as responsibility becomes tangible, as the sense of elevation grows stronger, a quiet fear slips in. It does not scream. It whispers. It asks whether you are truly ready. It suggests that perhaps someone else would handle this better. It replays your past mistakes as evidence that you might mishandle what is coming. This fear does not show up during obscurity. It shows up during coronation. And that timing is not accidental, because fear arising as coronation approaches is not always opposition. Sometimes it is awareness. Awareness of weight. Awareness of responsibility. Awareness that the next season carries consequences beyond yourself. You are no longer just fighting for survival. You are stepping into stewardship, and stewardship awakens seriousness. The trembling you feel is not the trembling of incompetence. It is the trembling of significance. There is a paradox hidden here. The trembling hands paradox, where the very fear you interpret as weakness is evidence of humility. Those who ruin influence are rarely the ones who hesitate. They are the ones who feel entitled. Arrogance rushes forward without reflection. Pride assumes readiness without examination. But you are examining yourself. You are asking questions. You are feeling the gravity. That gravity is healthy. It means you understand that authority is not decoration. It is duty. You do not want the crown merely for visibility. You want to steward it well. And that desire not to fail is not insecurity. It is reverence. Throughout Scripture and history, those called into significant roles often responded first with reluctance. Moses argued that he was not eloquent. Jeremiah protested that he was too young. Gideon questioned whether his family background disqualified him. Their hesitation was not rebellion. It was humility. They recognized the scale of the assignment. And in each case, God did not withdraw the call because of their fear. He reassured them that capability would not originate from them alone. This reveals a crucial principle: God enables the chosen rather than choosing the capable. If selection were based on natural competence alone, grace would be unnecessary. If assignment required flawless confidence, none would qualify. The pattern is consistent. Calling precedes comfort. Commissioning precedes certainty. The trembling you feel is not a sign that you were miselected. It is proof that you understand the stakes. You do not take lightly what is sacred. That awareness protects you, because humility stabilizes authority. The moment you stop trembling entirely is the moment you risk forgetting dependence. Weakness then becomes the space where divine power manifests most clearly. You have likely heard that strength is perfected in weakness, but rarely is it explained beyond cliché. Weakness creates openness. When you recognize your limitations, you remain teachable. When you feel your insufficiency, you remain reliant. When you admit that you cannot carry the weight alone, you make room for grace to distribute it. Divine empowerment does not override human agency. It partners with it. Your role is obedience. God's role is enablement. The fear that whispers, "What if I ruin it?" can be reframed as a reminder that you are not meant to carry it alone. The assignment is heavy precisely so that you lean. If it were light, you might attempt to lift it independently. And independence is the faster path to collapse. Consider the alternative. Imagine stepping into influence with absolute self-assurance, convinced of your own sufficiency. That posture breeds negligence. It blinds you to feedback. It resists correction. It equates criticism with attack. But trembling keeps you cautious. It keeps you reflective. It keeps you anchored to prayer rather than ego. Your hesitation does not disqualify you. It qualifies you, because it signals that you do not crave power for vanity. You desire responsibility with integrity. Accepting the assignment instead of asking to be replaced is the pivot point. It is the moment you move from fear to faith, not because fear disappears, but because you choose obedience despite it. There may be a temptation to pray, "Lord, choose someone else." That prayer sounds humble, but often it is disguised avoidance. True humility says, "I am aware of my limitations, but if you are with me, I will step forward." That is the posture that unlocks enablement. The trembling hands that feel uncertain become steady when they remember whose authority they carry. The crown does not represent self-exaltation. It represents delegated authority. Delegation implies source. You are not inventing this new level. You are entering it under covering. When you internalize that truth, fear shifts from paralysis to reverence. You begin to see that your awareness of weakness is the very safeguard that will keep you aligned. You stop interpreting anxiety as a verdict and start recognizing it as transition. Every elevation requires internal expansion. Expansion stretches comfort zones. Stretching triggers resistance. Resistance produces discomfort. Discomfort is not a signal to retreat. It is evidence of growth. The final fear before breakthrough often masquerades as self-doubt. But beneath it lies preparation. You have been forged through integrity. You have recalibrated your biology. Now you are being refined in humility. The sequence matters. Integrity ensures you will not misuse authority. Alignment ensures you can sustain authority. Humility ensures you will not corrupt authority. With those three in place, the crown can settle safely. So instead of asking to be replaced, ask to be strengthened. Instead of interpreting trembling as incapacity, see it as sensitivity. Sensitivity to weight is what prevents recklessness. Recklessness is what destroys influence. You are not reckless. You are reflective. That reflection is not weakness. It is wisdom forming. And as you accept the assignment, even with a measured breath and a cautious heart, you step into the truth that you were never chosen because you were fearless. You were chosen because you were faithful. Faithfulness in fear is more powerful than confidence in comfort. And the moment you say yes, even quietly, even internally, you align yourself with the enabling grace that turns trembling hands into steady leadership. The three protocols of the crown now becomes the architecture that will protect everything you have fought to secure, because elevation without structure collapses under its own weight. You have integrity, you have alignment, you have humility, but authority requires protocol. Without protocol, you will leak energy. Without protocol, you will overexpose vision. Without protocol, you will surrender peace to noise. The crown is not sustained by emotion. It is sustained by discipline. And the first discipline that must be installed is what can be called royal silence, because for years you have been over-explaining yourself in environments that were never designed to steward your vision. You shared prematurely. You explained excessively. You attempted to make people understand assignments that were not assigned to them. When misunderstanding followed, you felt wounded. When doubt followed, you felt destabilized. But royalty does not over-explain decrees. Authority does not require consensus to proceed. Ending over-explanation is not arrogance. It is discernment. Not everyone has clearance to your internal downloads. When insight is fresh, it is fragile. When vision is forming, it requires protection. Seeds do not flourish when constantly uprooted for inspection. Guarding divine downloads until manifestation means you allow revelation to mature privately before presenting it publicly. There is a gestation period for every instruction. Speaking too soon invites interference. Some people question because they lack faith. Others question because they lack capacity. Either way, premature exposure can dilute clarity. Royal silence is not isolation. It is filtration. It is understanding that if someone is not part of the solution, they do not need access to the strategy. Silence becomes strategic power when it prevents unnecessary friction. You do not announce every battle. You do not publicize every instruction. You move quietly until movement becomes visible through fruit. This protects your energy. It protects your nervous system from defending what has not yet been built. It protects your focus from unnecessary debate. And when silence is practiced correctly, it generates authority rather than suspicion. People sense stability in those who are not compelled to explain themselves constantly. The second protocol naturally emerges from the first, because once you stop over-explaining, you must also transform how you speak. This is where the decree replaces desperation. For a long season, your prayers may have sounded like survival requests. Lord, please fix this. Lord, if you can. Lord, help me. There is no shame in wilderness language. Wilderness seasons require dependence. But as you cross into governance, the tone shifts. Authority speaks differently than survival. Jesus did not beg storms to calm. He commanded them. The language of the kingdom transitions from pleading to proclaiming. This is not about pride. It is about position. When you understand who backs you, your words carry weight. Transitioning from begging to commanding means you stop reinforcing lack through constant repetition of it. You stop narrating your obstacles as if they are immovable. Instead, you declare alignment. You declare provision. You declare clarity. Words are not decorative. They are directional. Neuroscience confirms what Scripture has long implied: language shapes perception, and perception shapes response. When you repeatedly speak fear, your brain scans for confirmation. When you repeatedly declare peace, your nervous system begins to align with that expectation. Words shape atmosphere internally before they influence circumstances externally. This is why careless speech weakens authority. The wilderness language of complaint keeps you mentally anchored in scarcity. The language of decree shifts your posture into expectation. It trains your brain to anticipate solutions rather than threats. And when you speak what you sense the Father saying rather than what panic suggests, you stabilize both theology and biology simultaneously. The decree is not shouting at the sky. It is calibrating your internal environment so that faith becomes embodied rather than theoretical. Yet even with silence and decree in place, there remains one more vulnerability that can undermine your authority before the day even begins. This is where the frequency guard becomes non-negotiable, because the morning is not neutral territory. The first inputs of your day shape the trajectory of your mind. If the world writes on the tablet of your consciousness before you do, you spend the rest of the day reacting. Morning routine becomes fortress not because it is ritualistic, but because it establishes baseline. If you wake and immediately check notifications, you import other people's urgency into your nervous system. If you scroll headlines before centering yourself, you allow global chaos to dictate your internal rhythm. Protecting brain state before external noise is a strategic defense. When you begin your day intentionally, whether through prayer, deep breathing, structured reflection, or guided entrainment that shifts your brain into calmer frequencies, you set the tone rather than absorb it. The frequency guard means you decide what frequency you operate on before the world attempts to tune you. If you begin in calm, you respond from calm. If you begin in panic, you carry panic into every interaction. Guarding the crown by guarding peace is practical, not abstract. Peace is not passivity. It is clarity under pressure. And clarity is impossible when your nervous system is hijacked. Your morning practice is not luxury. It is preparation. It signals to your brain that you are safe. It signals to your spirit that you are aligned. It signals to your environment that you will not be manipulated by urgency. Over time, this discipline compounds. You become less reactive to criticism. You become more discerning about opportunities. You become selective rather than scattered. And scattered leaders lose authority quickly. Authority thrives on consistency. Consistency thrives on regulation. Regulation thrives on protection. These three protocols interlock. Royal silence protects vision. The decree shapes direction. The frequency guard stabilizes execution. Together they form the structure that supports elevation. Without them, you may reach influence but struggle to sustain it. With them, you move steadily. The crown does not wobble because your mind is anchored. Your words are intentional. Your exposure is measured. You stop living in reaction and start living in response. And when response replaces reaction, you become far less susceptible to manipulation, distraction, or emotional sabotage. This is how governance begins internally before it manifests externally. You do not need louder faith. You need disciplined alignment. The protocols are not restrictions. They are reinforcements. They protect what integrity built, what humility preserved, and what alignment activated. And as you practice them daily, you will notice a subtle shift. You no longer feel rushed to prove yourself. You no longer feel obligated to explain every move. You no longer feel hijacked by every headline. You begin to move with quiet authority. That quiet is not weakness. It is weight. Sarah's shift brings everything we have discussed out of theory and into lived experience because principles become believable when they are embodied. Sarah was not a mystic in a monastery or a theologian with endless hours for contemplation. She was a business owner responsible for payroll deadlines, customer expectations, and the relentless pressure of survival. Her company had once shown promise, but a series of setbacks placed it on the brink of collapse. Contracts fell through, expenses rose, clients hesitated. Every notification on her phone felt like a potential threat. She woke up with a racing mind and fell asleep with unfinished calculations spinning in her thoughts. Outwardly, she maintained composure. Internally, she was unraveling. The stress was not abstract. It was measurable. Her heart rate remained elevated. Her shoulders were perpetually tight. She snapped at employees over minor mistakes. She began making rushed decisions just to relieve the sensation of pressure. High beta panic was driving her strategy. Instead of responding with clarity, she reacted with urgency. She chased opportunities that looked profitable but did not align with her long-term vision. She discounted services impulsively to secure quick cash. She worked 18-hour days, believing that grinding harder would compensate for her fear. The more she forced, the more fragmented she became. And the more fragmented she became, the poorer her decisions grew. This is what high beta does. It narrows perception. It amplifies threat. It confuses motion with progress. Sarah believed that exhaustion proved commitment. In reality, it was evidence of misalignment. Everything changed not because her external circumstances shifted overnight, but because she applied the protocols deliberately. She began with royal silence. She stopped narrating her crisis to every friend who would listen. She recognized that constant venting was reinforcing panic rather than producing solutions. She withdrew her vision from environments that responded with doubt or fear. Instead of over-explaining her struggles, she guarded her strategy. This was not isolation. It was filtration. She allowed fewer voices into her decision-making process. That reduction alone lowered friction. Next, she implemented the frequency guard. Before checking emails, before reviewing financial statements, before engaging with clients, she committed to a structured morning recalibration. For 7 minutes each day, she used sound-based brainwave entrainment, designed to guide her mind into theta. At first, it felt unfamiliar. Her thoughts wandered, her body resisted stillness. But within days, she noticed subtle shifts. Her breathing deepened more quickly. The tightness in her chest softened. Ideas began surfacing not from panic but from calm observation. In theta, the mind integrates rather than fragments, and it was in that regulated state that she received what she later described as a download. The solution was not dramatic. It was simple. She realized that a particular service her company offered had been undervalued and poorly packaged. Instead of chasing new markets, she restructured that existing offering with clarity and precision. High beta would have dismissed the idea as too obvious. Theta allowed her to see its potential without distortion. Because her nervous system was calm, she did not rush the implementation. She applied the decree, shifting her internal language from desperation to authority. She stopped saying, "I hope this works." She began declaring, "This is aligned." Her team sensed the change. Her communication became measured rather than frantic. Within 3 months, revenue tripled. But the financial growth, though impressive, was not the true transformation. The true victory was that she did not achieve it through panic. She achieved it through peace. The anxiety that once dictated her mornings no longer dominated her baseline. She still faced challenges. She still encountered resistance. But her response was different. She was not grinding harder. She was aligning deeper, and alignment proved more sustainable than force. Sarah's story illustrates something crucial. The crown is stabilized internally before it manifests externally. When she guarded her frequency, her discernment sharpened. When she practiced royal silence, her strategy matured without interference. When she shifted from pleading to decree, her language shaped her perception, and her perception shaped her execution. The revenue increase was a byproduct of coherence. Many believe success requires more hustle. Often it requires less noise. Alignment over grinding is not laziness. It is leverage. Grinding amplifies effort. Alignment amplifies effectiveness. Sarah still worked diligently, but her work flowed from clarity rather than chaos. She did not eliminate discipline. She eliminated desperation. And desperation is expensive. It costs peace. It costs precision. It costs perspective. Peace, on the other hand, multiplies insight. It conserves energy. It expands creativity. Sarah's shift demonstrates that when biology and theology synchronize, strategy becomes sharper. The chosen are not meant to operate in constant survival mode. They are meant to govern with steadiness. And governance requires regulation. What happened in her company was not mystical favoritism. It was the result of internal recalibration. When her nervous system shifted from high beta to theta, she accessed insight that had been buried under noise. When she protected her mornings, she protected her decisions. When she silenced unnecessary commentary, she amplified discernment. Her business was on the brink of collapse. Her mind was on the brink of burnout. But by implementing the protocols, she moved from reaction to response. And in that response, stability replaced strain. Her story is not an anomaly. It is a template. The same principles that restored her clarity can stabilize your next season. Because the true evidence of exceeding expectations is not merely growth. It is growth sustained by peace. The final tactic. Distraction emerges not as an obvious attack, but as a subtle substitution. Because once you have survived storms, the strategy shifts. The enemy recognizes that you can endure adversity. You have proven that you can hold the rope when winds howl. You have shown that betrayal does not corrupt you and pressure does not break you. So the storm loses its intimidation. When storms fail, distraction becomes the weapon. Instead of overwhelming opposition, you encounter overwhelming opportunity. Instead of visible resistance, you face invisible dilution. Storms are replaced with busyness, and busyness is far more socially acceptable than chaos. No one questions busyness. It looks productive. It sounds responsible. It feels purposeful. Yet beneath the surface, busyness can fragment focus just as effectively as crisis. You begin saying yes more often. You accept invitations that seem harmless. You take on additional responsibilities because you feel capable. Your calendar fills. Your days accelerate. The noise is no longer external attack, but internal overload. And because the activity appears positive, you rarely challenge it. But not all movement is alignment. Some motion is misdirection. Good opportunities are not always God opportunities. This distinction becomes critical in seasons of elevation. When clarity increases, visibility often follows. When visibility increases, invitations multiply. Some will flatter your ego. Others will promise quick expansion. A few will genuinely align. The challenge is discernment. High beta once made you reactive to threat. Now distraction tempts you to react to possibility. The temptation shifts from fear to ambition. You reason that more exposure equals more impact. You assume that every open door must be entered. Yet wisdom understands that some doors are tests of focus, not invitations to progress. Accepting every opportunity stretches your energy thin. Divided attention erodes excellence. You begin to feel hurried again. Your mornings lose their calm. Your protocols weaken. And gradually, the peace you cultivated begins to fade. Urgency and haste may look similar on the surface, but they operate from different foundations. Urgency is clarity-driven. It recognizes timing and moves decisively. Haste is anxiety-driven. It reacts impulsively out of fear of missing out. Urgency feels grounded even when it is swift. Haste feels frantic even when it appears strategic. When you confuse the two, you risk sacrificing alignment for activity. You may justify haste by calling it productivity. You may label overcommitment as diligence. But the internal signal will always reveal truth. If your nervous system tightens again, if your sleep becomes restless, if your mornings begin with tension rather than steadiness, something has shifted. The crown is not designed to be carried in chaos. It rests best on a regulated mind. This is why the principle stands firm: if it costs peace, it is too expensive. Peace is not luxury. It is infrastructure. It supports discernment. It protects creativity. It stabilizes leadership. Anything that consistently drains peace without producing proportionate alignment is misaligned. The chosen must learn to evaluate opportunities not merely by profitability or visibility, but by resonance. Does this align with my assignment? Does this reinforce my calling? Does this preserve the frequency I fought to cultivate? Protecting clarity from clutter becomes the final discipline. Clutter does not always look messy. It can look impressive. It can look influential. But if it fragments your focus, it weakens your authority. The mind can only sustain a certain number of priorities before precision declines. When you allow too many inputs, your decision-making becomes diluted. You start reacting rather than discerning. The noise that once came from external chaos now comes from internal overload. The solution is not retreat. It is filtration. You must regularly audit your commitments. You must evaluate your calendar with the same seriousness you evaluate your character. Every yes carries a cost. Time is finite. Energy is limited. Clarity requires margin. Margin is not laziness. It is strategic reserve. It allows you to respond to divine nudges without panic. It gives space for insight to surface. When your schedule is saturated, inspiration suffocates. Distraction thrives in saturation. The enemy understands that you do not need to be destroyed to be delayed. You only need to be diverted. A diverted leader is less effective than a defeated one because they believe they are progressing while subtly drifting. This is why you must measure success by alignment rather than volume. Doing more is not always doing better. The kingdom advances through obedience, not overextension. You have already mastered endurance under pressure. Now you must master restraint under opportunity. Storms refined your integrity. Distraction will refine your discipline. And discipline is the guardian of clarity. If you sense yourself accelerating beyond peace, pause. Reapply the protocols. Reinforce royal silence. Reestablish the frequency guard. Revisit the decree. Remember that governance requires focus. Focus requires filtration. Filtration requires courage to decline even attractive options. Your authority does not increase because you say yes to everything. It strengthens because you say no to what does not align. Protecting clarity from clutter is not about shrinking your life. It is about sharpening it. When clarity remains intact, your actions become precise. When precision increases, impact multiplies without exhaustion. And when peace remains, your baseline distraction loses its power to destabilize you. The commissioning and coronation is not a dramatic spectacle in the physical sense, but a decisive shift in the spiritual one, because everything you have endured, everything you have restrained, everything you have recalibrated, has been leading to this internal enthronement. Imagine for a moment that you are not standing in your current room, not scrolling, not driving, not sitting where you are, but standing in a throne room that does not intimidate you because it recognizes you. The floor beneath you is steady, reflective, unshaken. The atmosphere is weighty, not oppressive, but substantial, filled with authority rather than noise. This is not fantasy. It is symbolism for activation. You are no longer being evaluated. You are being commissioned. The season of proving is over. The hidden tests, the private restraint, the Chazak grip when no one saw the biological recalibration. When anxiety once ruled the humility that trembled before responsibility, all of it has been recorded. The ruling begins not because you demanded it, but because you survived the refining without corruption. This is not about dominance over people. It is about governance over self. It is about carrying responsibility without losing peace. It is about embodying authority without abandoning humility. And as this commissioning unfolds internally, integrity and theta frequency are sealed together. Your Lev, your control center, remains aligned. Your nervous system, once hijacked by high beta survival, now recognizes calm as strength. This sealing is not mystical language alone. It is practical reality. You no longer confuse chaos with calling. You no longer equate exhaustion with dedication. You understand that stability is strength. The noise that once dictated your pace is bound. Chaos no longer commands your attention by default. Stress no longer sets your baseline before sunrise. You have learned to guard your mornings, to filter your opportunities, to silence unnecessary explanation, to speak with decree rather than desperation. Binding chaos and stress does not mean challenges disappear. It means they no longer possess you. They knock, but they do not rule. And with that stability comes a measurable window of acceleration. A 40-day decree of clarity and precision. Not a mystical countdown, but a focused season where your decisions will feel sharper, your insights cleaner, your timing more accurate. 40 days symbolizes transition, transformation, crossing from wilderness into governance. Over the next stretch of your journey, you will notice fewer impulsive reactions and more deliberate responses. You will sense when to move and when to wait without panic. Doors that once seemed welded shut may open not because you forced them, but because your alignment positioned you correctly. Precision replaces guessing. Confidence replaces scrambling. And now comes the final question. Not shouted, not imposed, but asked quietly in the sanctuary of your own mind, will you wear the crown? Not will you perform for applause. Not will you chase validation. But will you steward authority with humility, guard your frequency with discipline, and protect your peace with courage? The crown is not decoration, it is responsibility. It rests on those who say yes internally before they say anything publicly. That internal yes becomes covenant. It is not a scream of ego. It is a whisper of agreement. When you answer yes, even silently, you align yourself with the identity that has been forming beneath the surface. And here is the shift that must anchor you. You are no longer waiting for breakthrough. You are the breakthrough. The shift is not external first. It is embodied. You carry the clarity you once prayed for. You embody the steadiness you once admired in others. You operate from alignment rather than aspiration. The season of striving to prove yourself has closed. The season of moving with quiet authority has opened. You do not need to announce it. You will demonstrate it. The throne room is not a place you visit. It is a posture you inhabit. And from this posture you move forward, not frantic, not fearful, but firm.